So today we're going to be looking at the archaeology of a complete lost world. And I will open by saying that if you'd found the Roman Empire for the first time with no evidence 20 years ago, what reaction would that fill your soul? And the answer has to be that how can you find a civilization as big as the Roman Empire with having no evidence up until 20 years ago? And in some ways, not all the ways, we find civilization upon civilization across the Amazon basin. And we simply need to start off with this chart. You all know where Brazil is, you all know where Ecuador is, and you all know where those South American countries are. And you have all heard about the Amazon basin. And you've all been told from the moment that you went to school that the Amazon basin is the most pristine, untouched, natural resource unaffected by man on this planet, which is absolutely, to say the least, a lie. Most of the Amazon basin, from the archaeological evidence, has been proven to have been planted or reshaped or harvested by man at one point in time or another. Most of the Amazon basin can no longer be classed as pristine, untouched landscape. And we'll give you the archaeological evidence. Unfortunately, by making such a statement, it gives fuel to those who want to cut down the Amazon jungles. And so rightly, it gives fuel to those who wish to cut down the Amazon basin. It was said by conservationists that this pristine resource, unaffected by man, must be conserved at all costs. I do agree with that statement, but it is not pristine, and it's not a landscape unaffected by human interference. This list in front of you is a chart of a number of sites that have now been located across the Amazonian landscape. We're not talking about just Brazil. We're talking about the other side of Peru, the other side of Chile. When I say the other side of the Andes, we're talking about whole civilizations that we did not know about 20 years ago being found in Bolivia, Ecuador, Colombia, Brazil, and those other countries in South America. And the stark truth is that when you look at these sites and you find large arrays of ceramic pottery, plazas, roadways, some roadways have been recorded as 50 meters wide, meaning that along that entire route, you'd have a wholesale destruction of the entire course of trees that relate to that landscape. You're talking about cities with populations of 100,000 people and small villages in brackets of 2,500. These are not civilizations and people that all existed at one point in time, but it paints a new picture to the once believed to be pristine Amazon basin. But before I go anywhere, I would like to start by telling you half a fairy story. And it's a story that we used to believe 20, 30 years ago. And I've mentioned this story time and again, but its meaning is slightly different from what we're presenting today. In many ways, this lecture ties in with all the other lectures that we've done, civilizations disappearing, but this is not just one civilization. This is civilizations within microcosms of civilizations. And those dates that you can see on the chart, DC, basically refers to the Portuguese form of AD. So DC is basically AD. And you can see those dates there. Acatuba, that site itself with the ceramic pottery and the evidence tells us that that site and its civilization associated with it had either moved on or had ended sometime around the year 1160 AD. So the Spanish and Portuguese of a few more hundred years before they even get to South America. Look at that date there. Hatara. That site itself was abandoned in 1640. At the time, at the time that the Portuguese were conquering Brazil. But it's quite possible that the Portuguese hadn't even got to Hatara at the point that the city itself was abandoned. Look at these other dates. 1090. 1090, Wales was slowly being invaded by the conquerors from over the border. 1090 was the time that this site was seemingly abandoned. So these dates are really, really important. But what we need to do is go into that little story. And what I'm going to do, we're going to do a little bit of drawing over there on the right-hand side of the screen. And here we go. Let me get my annotation. Now, you've heard this story time and time again, but it's got a great deal of relevance to do with this lecture. So if we think X, 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 and X, is all those locations marked X, if you can imagine, on the side of the screen,
Can't see that, Carl.
You can't see that?
No, because you've got all the people there on that side.
Oh, flipping heck. Right, okay. We're going to have to clear that then. Right, okay, on the other side then, all the people. Right, can you see the X's now?
Yep, X is there.
Right, excellent. Now this is a really important point, right? So go with the flow on this one. Let me take a slurp. This story can occur anytime up until about 20, 30 years ago. Yeah. So ethnographers, anthropologists, and archaeologists were going into the villages within the Brazilian dense undergrowth where those X's are marked on the left. So you imagine that the white background is the jungle and the X's are villages. And all those experts would go to these villages and they would meet with the village chiefs. And they would say to the village chief, oh, how long have you lived here? And the village chief would say, our civilizations have lived around here for thousands of years. And the anthropologists, the archaeologists and ethnographers would turn around and say, but this building's fairly new. There's no evidence that you've lived around here for thousands of years. And the tribal chieftain would say, yes, we have lived within this landscape for thousands of years. And the archaeologist would go away and the other experts confused. So they would go back every few years. So in this case, they would go back after a decade. And they'd go back to those locations where the X's were. And where those X's were, there were no villages. The villages had been abandoned. And all they found was broken pottery, abandoned buildings, and so on. And the ethnographer would turn around and say to the archaeologist, this village and all the people have been wiped out by some kind of a plague. But they would go down the road and there would be new villages. And strangely enough, they would come across that tribal chieftain, the same tribal chieftain that they'd spoken to 20 years before. And they enter into conversation. And they say to this munkter of the village, they would say, well, right, where you were before, you had plenty. You had honeybees, you had honey, you had planted crops that you were planting, you had herbs around you, hundreds of varieties of different herbs, you had the animals, you had the birds, you had wonderful buildings. And what happened? And a chieftain would turn around and say, I decided to move. And the ethnographer would say, why did you move? And the chieftain would then go into a diatribe, very much as I'm doing now. And the diatribe would be quite simple. Do you know your Christianity, he would say to those experts? Do you remember the story of the Garden of Eden? And they would all say, yes. How do you know about the Bible? Well, I read the Bible, and they would be surprised. A savage reading the Bible. And the tribal chieftain would then turn around and say, what happened? There was Adam and Eve and the serpent. And you had a plentiful Garden of Eden. And because of actions with the snake and the serpent and Adam and Eve, the garden turned rotten. It turned bad. Things went wrong. And Adam and Eve had to abandon the Garden of Eden. And the ethnographer and the archaeologist and the anthropologist would say, yeah, that's sort of correct. That's the answer. And they would all look at each other and say, we don't understand. And the tribal chieftain would say, I will give you an answer. You're looking at our civilization, and this is what this is. This is what you're seeing. You're looking at this civilization with Western eyes. What you should be looking at is the environment. We know full well that if we'd have stayed in that locality for another 3-4 years, the Garden of Eden would no longer be plentiful. Within about 10 years, the wonderful landscape that we had tamed and lived alongside would be polluted with humanity. That's the reason why we abandoned it. And we went to a new locality, and we would find the goodness of Mother Nature, and then 7-10 years on, we would move elsewhere. And the three experts would go away still not understanding what they were saying. That's what I would say 20 to 30 years ago. In fact, that's what you could say today. But lots of these descendants of these people living within these villages would look at their ancestors, and their ancestors would have those great towns and cities. But for the reasons we've described, there would come a point that those landscapes would change. Managements of landscapes would change. Human beings would change their mind, but still those people live amongst the trees. As a Westerner, and looking around at everything that I do know, we know that in March, we were 2 weeks away from food shortages on a massive scale. But these people would never see food shortages. They would manage their landscape. And even before, with their great towns and cities, they were still able to manage their landscape. Except at one stage, they either decided to move their towns and cities somewhere else, or they decided to go back to the way they were. And we saw that last week, didn't we? We saw the Bedouins, Nabateans, and we saw the Bedouins. This is how other civilizations work. And don't argue with me over the issues whether these are civilizations or not. What is civilized? Civilized is living. Understanding, cooperation with your surroundings is civilization. We can't claim to have civilization when we could be on the edge of disaster any moment. I've got lots of articles to look at. And one article and me reading it and my perspective on it might make one or two of you angry. But that's why you come to these lectures, because there's a point of view to be made. So let's change and move on to a little headline. And we're going to change my screen. New screen share, headline, newspaper headline, in The Guardian. And this is dated Tuesday, the 26th, November 2019. Archaeologist fear Bolsonaro, who's the president of Brazil, very controversial. Archaeologists fear that the president's agenda will kill Amazon civilization research. And why? Because of the endless onslaught in the deforestation of the environment that the president is going along with. And actually, the agenda that the president's going along with has been impartially caused by what the archaeologists are finding. And what am I talking about? Well, when they're clearing large tracts of land, what are the loggers finding? Previous civilizations. They're finding roads created 1,000 years ago. They're finding buildings created 500 years ago. I'm going to have to cut your mic. Can you cut your mic, Pam? Good. Good, she has. And archaeologists are actually finding civilization. They're actually finding the very evidence that the president needs to advocate the deforestation of Brazil. The Bolivians are thinking the same now. The Ecuadorians are thinking the same, and so on and so on. And what we're talking about is if people have lived within these large tracts for thousands of years, Mother Nature takes over. Why can't we clear those trees? Because Mother Nature will take over again. That's the logic. There's no reason why we can't deforest thousands of acres, because the archaeology is telling us it's okay. Because when we do, and we allow Mother Nature to come back, all the trees will come back. This is the thinking. And this is when archaeology becomes very dangerous. It's become used as a political weapon. And actually, it's in the interests of the Brazilian government to fund archaeological research, to prove and to assist the call for the demolition of the wonderful trees that consist along the Amazon basin. Now, I've got to give you another little bit of a story. The other little bit of a story is, and this is another anecdotal story I've told you, but I'll give it to you in the right context. When we used to have pen friends, can you remember when we used to have pen friends? Back in the 1980s, I wrote off to a girl in Brazil, and this was about 1985, and she was called Fernanda. And over the next 10 years, we would write back and forth. And around 1990, and 1 second, I'm going to just close my window. Around 1990, she sent me a letter. And as I was reading through the letter, she said, "Did you know that Roman amphora has been dredged up in Rio de Janeiro harbor? Roman amphora, really fine Roman amphora." And I remember reading this and I thought, I don't understand. And she said, "You can't tell anybody because the archaeologists who found this amphora have been threatened. That if they make public that amphora has been found in Rio de Janeiro harbor, then, you know, it's going to have implications." And somebody has actually just flashed up on the box a minute. Hang on a minute. Is everything sounding okay, Keith?
Yeah, fine.
Oh my God, Pam's just left us. Gonna have to love you and leave you, folks. Sorry, internet engineer here. Oh. Anyway, so back to that story. So she said that that the archaeologists were told that, you know, if you make this public, they're going to lose their jobs. And I've looked at this many times and I've tried to understand what she meant. And I've seen stuff on the internet since that, you know, she was right in what she said. And actually, that's really dangerous, because if the Romans did manage to get to South America with the various trade winds 2,000 years ago, it means that Christopher Columbus was not the first to get to South America. And it also means that for a long period of time, there's been extensive trade between people in the Amazon basin and Europe. And do you know what? The evidence that we've been finding now, Keith, plays out the meaning of those finds in Rio de Janeiro harbor. Because if the Romans were trading amphora with the people in Brazil 2,000 years ago, they must have been trading with towns and cities. You know, what would be the point of wine to a tribal people who have only like 20, 30 people? They're not going to want to come out of their wonderful idyll, right? They're not going to come out of their civilization and what's been going on endlessly, where they've been sedentary, moving this way and that way, right? The amphora proves, again, more evidence to say that the Romans were actually trading with civilizations. And this pottery itself in front of us is the wonderful, this isn't the Roman pottery, this is pottery from Brazil that has been excavated on these archaeological sites. And this is being created by Brazilians. And this could not be created by those people in those in those small villages. To create this, you need kilns, you need temperature, you need trade. There's no reason why you would need this if you were living in small communities. There's no reason for it. I'm not saying they're backwards, but what would be the point of this if you're living from hand to mouth and things are working quite usefully? So what we've got another little article as well. This is also in The Guardian. It seems that everything seems to have been in The Guardian. This is also dating Tuesday, the 27th of March, 2018. Lost Amazon villages untouched by archaeologists. When it says 81 settlements, hundreds of settlements have been found since. And you're looking at this and you're thinking, what is this? Now, I need to make this statement before I go any further. And the statement is this, right? There are archaeologists that would claim that that's a ritualistic circle. And there are archaeologists that would also claim that that was created by aliens. And honestly, they are still there. There are other archaeologists that would claim that those are petroglyphs that were created as ceremonial platforms for purposes that we don't know about. And there's other archaeologists like me that explain that when you actually see roadways and plazas and houses and large amounts of pottery and layer upon layer of crap, that this is evidence of highly advanced civilizations. They've got towns and cities with banks and ditches around them. They've got roadways that go hundreds of miles in distance, going through swathes of thick, supposedly untouched, pristine tropical rainforest. And this is just against everything that I knew. When I was doing a course with Leicester University, and Keith, are you actually hearing my chickens in the background?
No.
Good, because if you were, I was just about to put her in a box.
Only your pure voice.
Oh, Keith, I love it. I love it. So what I'm going to do now, we're going to go back to those images where we were, back to that chart. The chart actually has some meaning now, so you can understand. We've done all the padded stuff, we've done all that, and then you go directly onto this, and you think, wow, this is highly advanced pottery. Is this being made on the wheel? However this is being made, this is being fired at about 800 to 1,000 degrees centigrade. To get kilning temperatures like that, you need an industry. And you also, you need plenty of wood. You need charcoal burners. You need to be able to create pottery like this, you need to be in one place, because that's where the clay is. All of these things look at big civilization. And somebody said to me on, it was Tuesday, they said, it's absolutely ridiculous to compare these civilizations with ancient Rome. They said, how dare you even say that this is akin to finding the Empire of Rome in the Amazon rainforest and nobody knew about it before. And I will stick by it. It is akin to that, because you could lose the Roman Empire in South America quite a number of times. And what I would say is that if you go to somewhere like Cambodia and you go to Angkor Wat, up until the time that Angkor Wat was rediscovered by Westerners, you could be walking alongside the remains of Angkor Wat and not even know they're there. So that's in Cambodia. When we look, for example, at the Aztecs and the Maya, you could be just wandering down a trackway, and there could be huge step pyramids on the left and the right, and you're not even going to see them. So these types of settlements, these types of people, and what they created could easily be lost. This is I know Ellen's probably shouting, you know, why haven't we seen a map up until now? Because we all know where Brazil is. We all know the plight of the tropical rainforest. And it will be very interesting to see how long it takes for the tropical rainforest to rejuvenate. In fact, we've got a great deal of evidence to say that most of the trees that are grown in the tropical rainforest were actually descendants of trees that were planted by humans. For example, we find Brazil nut trees in places where they didn't originate. So the Brazil nut trees would have been planted. We've got cocoa in localities where the only way it could have actually got there is to have actually been planted by human beings. We've got the likes of sweet potato being found in areas that, again, they could have only been planted by the ancestors of the people across this landscape today. All of these boxes, and you can see the Amazon River, Rio Negro, and you got the Rio Madeira, and you got the Rio Yingi. All of these have got some link and association with these settlements, these villages and towns. And there on the map, there's if you're looking, Marejo. Sorry about the pronunciation, Marejo. Archaeologists have found evidence of, wait for it, a city existing at Marejo with a population of 100,000 people in about 1400. 100,000 people, and we didn't even know it existed. So in other words, if we want to compare this is like finding Herculaneum, Pompeii by complete accident. And in fact, if it wasn't for the vine growers at Pompeii and Herculaneum, they wouldn't have been found in the first place. And they are two of the greatest sets of Roman archaeological remains on the planet. The point is that this world has been lost and is now being discovered today. And it's not just in Brazil, it's going all the way into these other countries. There are 9 other countries that take part within this landscape of the Amazon jungle. There are 10 countries altogether. And each of these countries have actually got archaeologists now currently out there finding whole civilizations that we can only dream about. And when we think about Petiti and we think about Fawcett, going beyond the Andes, finding pottery, finding formerly unknown civilizations, yes, it's now archaeological fact. What Fawcett found in the 1920s, and then he disappeared in the 1920s, and when he disappeared in the 1940s, you know, what he was saying existed, whole civilizations, is actually now fact. People didn't believe him back then. People didn't believe that these arrogant savages could actually give birth to any kind of civilization. And the racism is definitely still out there. Even the word Brazil nut, and I excuse the use of language, the word Brazil nut, the original word for the Brazil nut was nigger's feet or nigger nuts. So, and it's all to do with this sort of racism, to do with this landscape. And we'll move on a little bit from there now, and let's go on to this next slide. Now, when I did this lecture, I've never done even a bit of this lecture to you guys. But I can remember doing this lecture to, it was my Bridgen class. It must have been about 10 years ago, right? And I based it on my archaeological degree work with Leicester University. And, you know, that anecdotal story I told you would have been part of that. And the other part of the story was something that the archaeologists were only starting to understand without clearing large tracts of trees at Yingi and Acre. Yingi is in the south of Brazil, and also Acre is on the border with Peru. So in these areas where they before they started cutting down vast tracts of trees and finding these buildings and roads and so on, all this wonderful evidence. We were looking at something known as terra preta, or terra petra. And terra preta itself is black earth. And this is a really important point. Now, this is slightly different from that anecdotal story. What we're finding is that where we have those great towns and cities across the Amazon landscape, they would always add some phosphates, nutrition to the soil, creating thick beds of what's known as black earth, terra preta, which is the one on the right. So that one on the right is evidence of human occupation at localities over thousands of years. Now that conflicts with my anecdotal story. My anecdotal story says as follows, right? You live in an area, you abandon it, then 30 years later the village might go back there. It might be abandoned for 100 years and so on. So what you find a layer of terra preta, black earth, and then you see the color of the soil there on the left, and then you see black earth, color of the soil on the left, black earth, color of the soil on the left, whatever. But what we are finding is something different in lots of areas. We're finding black earth layers that go all the way down, meters and meters of black earth layers. There's actually the image of the guy behind me is actually standing in a black earth layer, and you can see lots of pottery in that. So these are not peoples that are exhausting the landscape. These are peoples that are farming and using the landscape for hundreds of years, and they're still adding nutritious value. They're still adding the phosphates and everything to the ground for trees to grow. How they are doing it, we're only starting to understand now. Yeah. The other point to be made with this, and this is very surprising, and I'll excuse anyone's ignorance on thinking that this is what they think the tropical rainforest should like. This is what should be under the trees on the right, right? And on the left, this is what the landscape might look like if human beings have exhausted the Amazon. But no, it's actually the other way around. And usually what we do see is because of the trees and the palm-like trees, and actually, strangely enough, large tracts of the Amazon were actually bamboo groves at one point. Well, yeah, it was. This is what my notes are telling me. And bamboo-like groves. So the landscape has changed. It's been changed around by human beings. The point I'm trying to make is this here is the natural soil. And it's only on the top, it's nutritious. And full of decayed material. And you can actually plant there for a short period of time. But after a few years, it's going to be barren. But if you planted crops here, you're going to be prosperous for many years. And then we go back to Bolsonaro, the Brazilian president. The Brazilian president is saying, we've got all these areas where we've got rich earth layers. We can plant there, right? and then we'll abandon the landscape, and the natural state of things would come back in and reforest the area. What we also used to be told is that by cutting down the trees, the pristine forest, you're only going to be able to grow crops there for a short period of time. We now know that's absolute nonsense, because the sample on the right shows that if you plant in the modern day across a landscape that's been cultivated and has been occupied by human beings 1,000, 2,000 years ago, you're going to have a prosperous crop for many years to come. So you can now see where the archaeology has been damning on the environment. The archaeology is now being used as a weapon. So if we move on a little bit more, I think I've covered everything there. It used to be, at one point, it used to be thought that when the Portuguese had got there, they used to think that if they cut down the trees, usually in the wrong areas, their crops wouldn't last very long, because they would be cutting down trees that were more or less pristine, had never been disturbed by man. If they had gone to the areas that had been disturbed by man, the Portuguese would have had crops that would have lasted hundreds of years. And the Portuguese, when they actually got to South America, the reason why South Americans make better slaves than those from Africa is that it was described by the Portuguese that the South Americans were so well fed that they could be used as laborers, they could be enslaved, they could be used as servants, and so on. And that's why the Portuguese thought that this was a bountiful landscape, but they didn't go to the right areas to cut down the trees, like we're doing today. The dangers of archaeology. Previously hidden ancient earthworks in the Amazon revealed. Again, that statement, challenging assumptions of pristine rainforest. Again, terra preta. And you can see there the biochar soils of the Amazon. It's very rich. A normal soil. Again, the one on the right does surprise me. I would always think that the tropical rainforest would be bountiful to plant crops where trees have grown for a very long time, and the answer is that's not actually true. And those Portuguese making the mistake. But you know what, guys? Maybe I should have done this lecture before I did the one looking at Darien and the Scottish colony at Panama, because you'll be right in quoting me saying that the Darien project was doomed to fail. It was always going to fail. But maybe I was wrong in that if the Scots had learnt the way that the native peoples were actually taming the landscape, the Scots may have actually succeeded at Darien. And maybe that's one thing that I actually got wrong. And you can see what I've been talking about. The area on the left is semi-virgin tropical rainforest, and the area on the right is a landscape that would have been used by those civilizations in Yingui province in southern Brazil. This is evidence that people have lived. The one on the right lived within this landscape for a very, very long time. And what we're finding at the site of Hatara in the north of Brazil is that the landscape is dominated by thick layers of black earth. But then the people left. And, the explanation has to be that they all left because of disease. But the answer, that might not actually be the case. They left for other reasons. And do you know what, Keith? That gives me another problem. And the problem that offers me is, when we did the collapse of the Inca civilization.
Yeah.
I will go with most of that lecture, but I'll also question myself on one point. The point is, how do we know? How do we? How is there might be evidence out there that some of the Inca actually thought, right, we're just going to abandon the old ways of living, and we're going to move somewhere else, and we're going to actually go to the generic of our mindset. We don't know whether they did or not, that did that or not. But it gives another explanation to the loss of 10 million people when we think about some of those involved in the Inca genocide in the 1530s, 1540s. And there's that archaeologist. You can see there that at the Hatara site, you've got layer upon layer upon layer of black earth. Kathy's been with me, scrambling down cliff edges. And Kathy's been with me to a site on the island of Sanday. And when you look at this site at Sanday, what you see, you've got Mesolithic archaeology going back 7,000 years ago. You've got Neolithic archaeology, and you've got layer upon layer of crap. Broken bits of pottery, human bones, animal bones, even bits of charred wood, the works, right? Now, that's what we see on the island of Sanday, Orkney, and this is exactly what we're seeing in Brazil as well. And if anyone wants to say that I'm absolutely talking nonsense and there's no evidence for these great civilizations existing, smell the newsprint. We've been smelling the newsprint for some time, but we've not been able to interpret it, and now we're getting layer upon layer. That down at the bottom, that is actually pottery, big chunks of pottery. And it's that understanding of not understanding that makes looking at this so wonderful. I'm an avid tree lover, right? We're members of the Woodland Trust. I actually own an acre of land in Brazil, not in Brazil, Belize, to save it from destruction. I love trees, but the argument not to pull down those trees has disappeared. The argument used to be that this is pristine, untouched woodland. And I can't argue that anymore because I would be lying. So, and how would I have a conversation with the Brazilian president as an archaeologist? He would turn around and say, well, actually, you're giving me the reason to cut down these trees. And I can't argue against that. But there is an argument against that. And it's not a Western argument. It's a native argument. It's a Yingi argument, which we'll go on to. The Yingi have been in southern Brazil for thousands of years. They've cut down the trees. They've replanted the trees. They've had a civilization. They've moved the civilization. They live like they do today and not like they did in the past. You can't go out and cut down 1,000 acres of tropical rainforest and expect it to rejuvenate like it did 1,000 years ago. Because 1,000 years ago, they cut down 2 acres, replanted something, and then they cut down another 2 acres and another 3 acres, and another civilization down the road did this. However, the animals would go somewhere else, and most of the native species would remain. But today, we rape the landscape, and maybe that's the answer. It's not. It's raping the landscape in the wrong way.
Yeah, it's the scale, isn't it? I think.
Yeah, it's the scale. It's the scale. It doesn't make it right. Okay. Okay. Let's sort of do a little bit of metaphor. touching a woman's behind, right, is wrong, and also touching a woman's shoulder without asking her is also wrong. But touching a woman's shoulder is better than touching her backside. And I think that's what we've got to look at, the best of all worlds, and touching the woman's shoulder, and cutting down small areas in isolated pockets. Okay, if you want to cut down 1,000 acres, you leave 1,000 acres as well. So you cut down 1 acre, you leave an acre. You cut down another acre, and you leave an acre. That's how you should do it.
Yes.
And if they're going to make progress, I can't. The Brazilian government is actually saying, what right have you got as Westerners to tell me what to do with my country? And this is everything to do with the archaeology. This is why archaeology is so relevant. And those are the Brazil nuts themselves. And the cultivated Brazil nuts, that's what we're talking about. We've got some wonderful charts coming up. But this is amazing. And I've played around with this so many times this week, and we're going to do it again today. And do you know what? Do you know what is great, Keith? When I'm doing a lecture I've got a group of young explorers that I teach on a Wednesday afternoon, and two of them on Wednesday went, "Oh my God, that's amazing!" And I thought, "Oh my God, I've actually reached out to them," and they said, "Oh my God, that's amazing," because what I was doing, I was saying, look at the symmetry here. Look at that linear. And this is from an aerial view. Look how straight that line is, right? Look at that there. And if we sort of move that one along there, isn't that absolutely amazing?
Yeah.
The level of symmetry there. Slightly off there with my line there, but the level of symmetry that is. And then I was talking in a week about the sense of line of sight. The only way you're going to be able to create something like this is you've got all the trees cut down. You've got to have line of sight to get that alignment. So all the trees were cut down to create something like this, and then you get the several different schools of thought. I, as an archaeologist, this is a settlement site. Other archaeologists, well, it's got to be ritual, and people still lived in roundhouses. Oh, and by the way, they got roads linking the roundhouses to these sites, and you're thinking, right, okay, shut up. So and actually, that doesn't hold as an argument anyway. You're cutting down the trees anyway, and to do this, it's civilization. So what is the argument? And this, and you can get an idea of scale. That's a tiny fence post, and that's a cow. And that is one of the great palms growing there.
Right.
And it's they've cleared all this, and then they're thinking, right, we'll either farm it or we'll just let the trees take over again, and that's what they're going to do. But again, is what you're talking about is scale, and I would love to get on my high horse and say what they're doing is wrong. Bloody evil bastards cutting down the trees and all the rest of it. I want to say that, but I can't, because it would be completely biased. Now, I want to go through this little bit. This is really useful. There's 5 sites on there. So let's start off with one that is familiar. We've mentioned Yingi, and this is in southern Brazil. At Yingi, they found networks of moats, roads, central plazas of ring villages, causeways and canals from 800 AD. So just the Yingis, the Yaganos people, that is astounding in itself. But what is even more astounding is this locality, Marejo. Discovered foundations of houses, elaborate pottery, and evidence of advanced agriculture that could have supported, wait for it, 100,000 people. Now, the population of London was struggling to get that number, but they had 100,000 people living at that locality. Okay, that locality. And I know if Gough was on the screen, he's got to be the only one this week. I've got lots of people in the Royal Navy, Merchant Navy. I've basically mentioned Manaus, and I've thought that everyone's been there, and everyone that I've known have been to Manaus if they've had a naval life. And I hope Gough has actually been there. At Manaus itself, they found domesticated fruit trees, orchards, and soil fertilized by charcoal, human waste, and other organic matter, large plaza centers and architectural works. And that civilization ended in the year 1440. And that's 52 years before Christopher Columbus even got there. So we can't, and that's another thing, right? I like to stand by what I say in my lectures, but you can get things wrong, or you can have different interpretations, and I'll admit that. When we looked at the Inca, I basically said, look, you know, this civilization was flourishing until those bastards got there, those Spanish, and their disease deliberately introduced or whatever, wiped out the Incan civilization. And you're thinking, well, would the Incan civilization have collapsed 20 years later anyway? And would it have collapsed 100 years later, like all these other civilizations collapsed? Or did they collapse, or did they think, sod this for a game of soldiers, we're going to go somewhere else, you know? You know, Keith, I don't have a lot of spare time, as you can imagine, but when I'm actually typing stuff for the newsletter and I'm absolutely bored, shitless, replying to emails or something, I've got a video on in the background, and I've been watching lots of these videos about abandoned houses. And people have been going into mansion houses across Britain, and they, you follow the camera, and there's like a brand new Ford over there, and it's all overgrown with ivy, and you can see a Land Rover in a garage, and they managed to get into these buildings, and there's paintings on the wall, and there's china still up, and there's a computer in the corner, and there's a mobile there, and it's been abandoned for 10 years. And you always, and I've said this to Michelle, and I said, oh, that's because the person died. And I'm thinking, what? They had 20 cars. I don't know, exaggeration. They had 20 cars, and they just died. What, all of them? And nobody went back to retrieve anything. And that is a microcosm of all of what we're saying now. Why did that person abandon that mansion house? And there's not just that. In Britain, there are whole factories, companies that have just left everything and gone. Whether their company has gone bankrupt, or they've, and actually there's one company in Birmingham that they decided to rebuild a new centre, and they abandoned their laboratory and just thought, oh, we don't need that laboratory anymore, we'll just leave everything there and go somewhere else. We do that now. We do that now. And why couldn't they have done that in the past? Why not? We always have to have explanations that I try to give you every week. But there are other ways of looking at the abandonment of civilization. You know, I've always, not always, but when I'm giving a lecture on the Romans, Kathy might bring in an article, and she says, oh, look at this Roman villa that's been found, right? And the archaeologist always says, well, they actually found some gold in a hole over there, and actually they were meant to go back. No, they bloody wouldn't. No, they didn't want to go back. They decided to leave everything and go somewhere else. Why do we need all these explanations? And why do we need to make a stereotype of these civilizations that we're actually finding? Why not abandon their landscape? Why not go to another way of living? Why not bugger off to Easter Island? Do you know what I mean? Northern Bolivia found mounds of fertile soil, raised fields, long causeways, and canalized rivers built around 1,200 years AD. So when we were still an independent country over in Cymru here, they were at the height of their civilizations with these canals. Why the hell do they need canals when there's all the rivers around? They use canals. Great. They use canals to get around, just as the people of Cambodia did, just as the people of the Aztec did. villages with populations of 2,500 people. And suddenly in northern Bolivia, before the Spanish even got to this part of Bolivia, they basically upped and left, or something happened. Or even better, they were taken away by aliens. If von Daniken had this evidence back in the 1960s in Chariots of Fire, this would not only prove that aliens were amongst us, but they've got all these thousands of abandoned towns, settlements, and all over the place is proof that aliens were once here and they just disappeared. San Martin in Peru found semi-domesticated fruit trees, agricultural earthworks, keep the fruit trees over there a second, and mounds with soil enriched with charcoal, phosphorus and calcium that could have supported at least 5,000 people, dating back to 900 AD. So you're talking about a civilization existing alongside the Inca that the Inca probably knew nothing about. Obviously, the Inca are coming 350 years later, but it's possible that town was still going. And even the Inca didn't know about these people, and they didn't know about the Inca, because there's hundreds, if not thousands of miles apart from these people. Why do we always need to think that there are all these individual links when there's not? There's only symmetry of the archaeology. So there's not symmetry of civilization. And here we go. I love this one. Space archaeology in the Amazon, Bolivia. And all those little circles indicate settlements that nobody knew existed. Or, if you can see the word geoglyphs, because they haven't really been excavated or interpreted, the line from the Bolivians and lots of other archaeologists, those other half, and not me, and my half, is that because we don't know what they are, they're definitely sort of geoglyphs, and they were just created to communicate with the heavens or something. And these are what those geoglyphs are. There are going to be captions coming up. We might have a little break in a few moments, but I'll keep going for a little while. So these are what they describe as geoglyphs. I tell you what, right, if this was a time team aerial photograph, let's just do a time team, right? Right. Yes. Okay. As a time, that definitely, that's a sign of a Bronze Age barrow. The ditch is still there; it's been flattened, and that's definitely a sign of Woodhenge. Oh, by the way, this is an enclosure for an Iron Age settlement. And actually, even though there are distances, and the interpretation is completely wrong. These were created by human beings for reasons. And if you're going to go through the effort of creating something like this, you need to live somewhere. So these are habitational sites, as we're actually finding with Hatara in the north and the Inca civilization in southern Brazil. And if we move, we'll do all these, even if it goes on a little bit. But so this is that description of the stuff that they're finding all over the place. Ancient earthworks built in the Amazon have been revealed due to deforestation and modern technologies. And actually, there's a good point to be made here. I have taken people into fields and I've said, look at that over there. It's a mound and a bank. And I've got everybody going, shaking their heads. No, there's not. Oh, and by there, if you see the little indentation in the ground, that's a well. And people are going, oh, and by the way, there's a wall over there and there's a building. Look at that. It's amazing. That's because I've seen an aerial view before you guys get there, or it's because I've been involved in archaeology for 35 years to know that what I'm looking at is actually a bank and a ditch. When you're cutting down this type of landscape, it's quite likely that you're going to see bugger all on the ground, even though from above you can see this whopping massive ditch and a bank. But on the ground, your perspective's wrong, with all humps and bumps, trees tossed over and soil every bloody where and rotting plants everywhere. You're not going to see it. So it's been a while. It's been a while that's been taken until we've got this modern technology to understand that what we've got on the ground. The findings have been discovered in the western Brazilian Amazon by Brazilian and UK experts. So that's the western side. So that's over by Bolivia. The area has been covered by trees for centuries, but modern deforestation, along with satellite images, have revealed 450 of these large geometric geoglyphs. Oh, bugger me. No, they're not geoglyphs at all. Anyway, in the state of Acre. So the image that we just seen is Bolivian. So this is actually a bit further north of Bolivia. Their discovery is significant since it contradicts the theory that the rainforest ecosystem has never been touched by humans. Some of these structures have ditches 13 feet deep, in excess of 1,000 feet in diameter, right? So if you want to get an idea of 1,000 feet in diameter, just walk the Cardiff Central Station platform from one end to the next, and you get an idea how long 1,000 feet is. These things are vast. They are marked by a highly formalized structure made of geometric circles and squares. But it doesn't mean to say that they're created by aliens. On these sites as well, what we do find is plant. Microscopic plant evidence, phytoliths. I hate it when they use the word fossil because, you know, okay, the evidence and so on. So they're finding that the landscape was different at one stage, and then these things have been created and it's different again. People have lived amongst it. Other plants have come in, other things have happened, and so on and so on. And it's clearly saying those side of archaeologists on the west, the function of these sites is not for habitation or defensive reasons. So they're just creating these. When archaeologists don't know what they're looking at, it's always, they're definitely ritual and for ceremonies, it's got to be. But where did these people live? No, they didn't live anywhere. They're being created by aliens. So what we've got at these sites, we've got a varied section of information. This next paragraph is actually really useful. Researchers also conducted studies around 2 sites to define to what extent the region was forested when the geoglyphs were built, resulting in the reconstruction of 6,000 years of vegetation and fire history. So trees, fire, trees, fire, trees, fire, and so on and so on. That's exactly what we're seeing today. And this is stunning, this next statement, believe it or not. These findings were stunning as it turns out humans had altered the natural growth of the bamboo forests. I'll repeat, bamboo forests for millennia, and made clearings to build the geoglyphs. And then you got the palms being introduced and all these other trees. The concentration on various tree species such as palms used for food and building, and avoided deforestation of larger areas, which we were talking about earlier on, with the use of fire. Researchers believe that today's forests bear traces of these ancient agroforestry practices. Where you're seeing species introduced, that's where we've got our human ancestors. And again, what you can see on this is a period, it's talking about 650 years ago, palm species declined and a more natural forest ecology returned. So in other words, when you're looking at this, just a few things, it's just so, there's so much going on, because you can see the later archaeology, and that's just before it. And before that is that. And then before that, the slighter the lines, the older they are in time, basically, when you look at the geophysics, in theory. Actually, this isn't geophysics, this is area photography, but it's the same process. Anyway, and look at that there. Absolutely amazing. Now, I'm looking at this and thinking, I have seen something like this, and when I went up to when I went to the Park Prison site, not as a prisoner, may I add, on the south western side of the main perimeter. there's a site that looks like this, basically a ditch that goes around a central area, right? And that's actually a hunting lodge with a ditch around it. And you're thinking, well, that's not ceremonial, is it? And that's from the medieval period. Well, actually, these things, lots of these are from the medieval period as well. What exactly are they? But they're really well defined and they're really well made. And look at the line. This, when I draw in here, that is a straight line. And look at that as it goes off. And look at that as it goes off as well. That's like, I put the line slightly off there, but that is absolutely amazing the way these are actually being created.
It's obviously Roman.
Yeah, it is.
Those were the amphitheaters they found out in the harbour.
Obviously Roman, yeah, obviously, yeah. Shut up. You've annoyed me now. So looking at something like this again, and one of those other views, a beautiful interpretation, obviously a modern trackway. You can see an old roadway, an old sunken road leading to these sites, leading to a slightly walled, stockaded area, different boundaries all around the place, and these circular enclosed areas. That if this was found in a British landscape, not only could these be interpreted as wood henges or henge sites, you could actually say this is actually a ringwork from the Norman period. But then again, this is in Brazil. I know you're going to say something, Keith, but I'm not really interested. And what we're going to do, we're going to take a break on this image and we're going to say no more. If anything you want to say, Keithy, babes?
I agree with you I'd love to be able to criticize Brazil about their rainforest policy, but I find it more difficult because we've already done the same here in this country. We've got rid of most of our forests. We're still building on greenfield sites and we're supposed to know better. And
this is exactly what Bolsonaro is actually saying. He's saying that what right have you got to lecture us when you've cut down all your trees? Oh, yeah. And also, all he needs, can you imagine a British diplomat saying, well, you can't allow these trees to be cut down. Well, look at your own Prime Minister, HS2. Yeah, but this is, you're cutting down pristine rainforest. No, we're not. So in other words, there's no argument anymore. We've actually really shot ourselves in the foot on this one.
Yeah.
And then he can point towards around here in the valleys. I've got lots of film footage that I've filmed at the beginning of the year of the whole landscapes being set alight. How is that any different from the Amazon basin? So I'm sure there'll be some more answers. So what I want us to do is have a few questions, and let's bring in somebody sensible like Ellen. Go on, Ellen.
No, I haven't got any questions at all.
Oh, I'm surprised with that one.
The first map you had, the grey map, on the left-hand side, it showed Ecuador.
Yes.
Well, I thought,
no, on the left,
Ecuador,
north, left.
Ecuador, Nicaragua, Guatemala in the middle bit.
No. That's God, you're thinking about Venezuela, aren't you? No, not Venezuela. No.
Grey map, right at the beginning. You know, once you started showing maps.
Oh, let's go back and let's just have a quick look. Hang on. Let's see where we are.
The second two letters were a bit vague because of the background. The very black and white one at the beginning.
Yeah, here we go. We're back at the beginning.
The next one to that, or after that. There, look.
Venezuela, yeah.
No, here on the left-hand side, look.
Ecuador.
Yeah.
On the northwest, yeah, that's right.
Is that where Ecuador is?
It was when I visited it, yeah.
All right. What's north of Nicaragua then?
Guatemala.
Nicaragua. What's on the top?
Guatemala.
You know, in the isthmus in the middle, the bit.
Panama.
Oh bloody hell! We got to have a map of the world now. Right, let's just get this straight. Well, there's always one in there, Goff.
Afterwards on Google.
No, we've got it now. We've got Google up now. There it is, right? So you've got El Salvador you're thinking of.
Oh, it's not Ecuador then. Right, okay, that's all right. I couldn't read it. I said the second letters were a bit vague.
So you got right. So you got Panama, Costa Rica, Nicaragua, Honduras, El Salvador, Guatemala, Belize, and Mexico.
Right. Okay. Sorry, my fault.
Right, Goff. Yeah, it is your fault. Anyway, Goff. Have you ever been to Manaus?
Yeah.
Yeah, you're actually one that's been there. Oh my God, that's amazing for once. Anything good? Well, I knew you've been at many. Go on.
Shrunken heads for sale in the little souvenir shops.
Yeah.
Charming.
Yeah.
And that's when you went there last with Eleanor, wasn't it? Flipping heck.
Yeah. I haven't been there for 30, 40 years, but I always remember that. And a vast river. I mean, it's amazing. You know, you can't imagine the size of the Amazon. It's just incredible. I was going to ask you how you spell Yingi.
X-I-N-G-U.
X-I. Oh, okay. Okay, great.
Okay. Yuganos. Right, so what we're going to do is, Chris, I know Kathy wants to come in there. Go on, Chris.
Just to say, Lynn was talking to me yesterday about something she's seen on the Smithsonian Channel about Machu Picchu, and they've just done LiDAR all over it, and it's huge, apparently, much bigger than they thought. And they think now it's used as an observatory because there are holes cut in the wall that line up with the solstice and various star formations and things.
Aliens. Right. That's really useful. Give our love to Lynn. Right, Kathy, go for it. Go. Anything else, Chris, or no? Okay.
No, it's just about buried, you know, you're saying about rediscovering things. Well, they obviously haven't discovered all they need to know about Machu Picchu.
No, exactly. Or Kathy. Nobody's ever discovered much about Kathy either. Right. Okay, Kathy, talk to us.
It's the river Xingu and the Xingu people.
So Yingi's wrong.
Yes.
Xingu.
And
right. Okay. I'm corrected for once. That's good.
And Negro nuts would just have meant black nuts. Nothing to do with the people.
Yeah, exactly. But it has. But in my notes, it was interpreted as being as a racial thing. That's the point I'm trying to make. It was banned. They were niggers' feet or nigger nuts up until a few years ago, and obviously they're now Brazil nuts. That's the point.
The name nigger would have predated the discovery of the nuts, wouldn't it?
So what? Anything, Karen, Chris, or Jim?
Yes. Okay, you go first. After you, Jim.
Hang on, you got to unmute yourself.
Right. If there are large civilizations, have they come across any burial sites yet?
The answer is that I've got nothing on those lines in my research at all. But when we look at, say, for example, the Great Pyramids, the Great Pyramids were believed to have been constructed by slaves up until a few decades back, simply because they hadn't found the homes of the people who actually built the pyramids, who actually lived in proper villages. So, if they can miss things like that, I'm sure we can miss huge cemeteries. And cemeteries, if they're not going to mark their graves, it's going to be very difficult to find large cemeteries. And also the other point as well is, in Britain, when we looked at the evidence for the Battle of Towton, with the 50 bodies found at the Battle of Towton, up until those bodies being found associated with the Battle of Towton, we had little to no evidence of anybody being found in an archaeological context associated with any battle ever fought in Britain. So, burials are the last things that are found. Chris?
On the this supposed trade with the Romans, the Amphors that they found in Brazil, given that a trade link is normally two-way, is there no evidence in Roman times of stuff having come back from Brazil, like those dishes and that?
Right.
I mean,
okay.
Holiday always brings a plate or a dish back, don't they, to put on the wall?
Okay. The answer is if the answer is quite clear. I went into a museum in Larnaca many years ago in Cyprus. It'd be 1989 actually. I remember going into this museum and I thought, I don't understand what I'm seeing, because the art in this museum in Larnaca from about 2,000 years ago was exactly the same as the art that I was seeing associated with the Aztecs and the Maya. And you look at this and you think there may have been two-way influence. And the biggest problem is that in the archaeology, if you get in really poor pottery, say these people traded forms of pottery with us, it could quite easily be mixed up with forms and types of pottery that we're seeing in the archaeology. So it's going to be difficult to interpret that. But I would say that there is limited, but there is evidence of two-way trade. So if that answers your question, good. What we're going to do, we're going to take a break, and Keith is going to take off his top. Oh, I tell you what, last night, right, one of the guys took his top off, and you could actually see his breasts.
Oh.
Did you like that, Carl?
But did I like that? You know, can I say something? Like, Michelle got really angry yesterday before the lecture. She said to me, I'm really not happy with this. And I said, one second, bear with me a minute. Hang on, stay there. Hiya, Michelle. Can I call you back in a minute? You be by your phone. I'll speak to you in a minute. I'm just about to talk about you now, so you can't hear it. I'll speak to you in a minute. Okay? Bye. Bye-bye. Yeah, no, Michelle was sat down in front of me and she said, I'm really upset. And I said, why? And she said, why is it women can't wander around with their tops off? Why can't we show our breasts? Why, if we go out with our tops showing, are we arrested by the police for indecent behavior? Why should men get away with going around with their tops off? And I looked over and she did have her top off. And I said, you've got a really good point, Michelle. I think I'm going to put that in a letter in the newspaper and support your claim to have your top off wandering around the streets.
Yeah, I won't object.
No, go ahead. Let them talk.
Freedom for all.
Michelle's got really nice breasts and they should be displayed. On that note,
you're not recording that.
That has been recorded. Okay, we'll take a break, folks.
Okay.
Now, do you know what? Before the break, Kathy came in with something, and it's the first time in ages that she's corrected me on the pronunciation of something. But the strange thing is when she said that I was calling the Zingi people, she said that they were the Shingi people, and I've found that they were the Zinu. They were actually called the Zinu. So we just got that pronunciation off somebody saying it on YouTube. So it's the Zinu, the Zinu people of southern Brazil. So it's good when you're corrected, but not when the correction's not exactly right. So it's good that we both learned something there anyway. This is Zinu. Now, this image that we can see in front of us is interesting from a number of different angles. And it's interesting because if I found this on an aerial photograph from Britain, this is very similar to the aerial photograph of the site known as Fleming's Down, a hill fort, which is near Ogmore in the Vale of Glamorgan. This is rather interesting from other levels. It looks very much as if it could just sit in the British landscape. And if I was interpreting this, if this was in the British landscape, I'd say it was a site that would be used for keeping cattle safe in the winter months or sheep. And there'd be one or two buildings there within the banks and ditches. And that would be my interpretation. But we don't really know what this site is, and we don't know really what the hundreds and thousands of sites what all their purposes were, and it's going to take a long time with a lot of archaeological research to work out what's going on. And again, we've already seen this one, but when the archaeologists are talking about the Inca state in north western Brazil, they're talking about petrographs, and well, all the ones that we've seen don't really look like petroglyphs, or they look like normal domesticated or defended sites of one type or another. But this looks very strange. And if anyone was to say that this looks like a petroglyph, which we don't really know what the meaning was, I would actually agree with them. So, and the symmetry of this is absolutely amazing. So we draw the line across there, and we draw that. You can see how aligned these are, even by sketching on top of them. It's just so well aligned. And if we want to draw a line directly across there, the mathematics used to create this is amazing. And I'm not gonna go any more than that. But these were all created, and I think let's go with a point I'm trying to make. These were created by a civilization, point 1. These were created 500, 1,000 years ago, point 2. These were created for a reason, point 3. And the technical innovation with the skills of these individuals is second to none. So those are all the points. They were definitely part of something, and part of a landscape that had been cleared. Again, all these unusual shapes and sizes and all these other things that go bump in the night. But what I'd like to do is I'd actually like to keep these images in the background. Or am I going to read the article out to you in full and show you the text? Yeah, let's do it that way. So I've got an article that I can actually show you in full. And when I was doing my course with Leicester University, little bits of this information were actually coming out in the American media. So Lost Cities of the Amazon revealed. Washington, September the 18th, 2003. Newly discovered traces of ancient roads, bridges and plazas in the Brazil's tropical forest may help dispel the once popular impression of an untouched Amazon before the Europeans arrived. In southern Brazil, archaeologists have found remains of a network of urban communities that apparently hosted a population many thousand strong. Look at this. Now, these are not round houses. These are long houses, and this sort of reconstruction is a bit flimsy, actually. But it sort of gives an idea. The main thing about this is that there's division, and there's roadways leading into a central plaza. The central plaza is an architectural feature of, for example, the Aztec world, and in a way the Mayan world as well. But the roadways being up to 50 meters wide, and there we go, the Zini region of southern Amazon, the Ziganos, and somebody said that guano or Ziguanos, guano, as we know, is shit. So one person jokingly said on Tuesday, "Oh, are they serious? These are the people of the shit," which would be interesting, because naturally you're going to need dung to make the landscape rich. They dug enormous ditches around the villages, built bridges and moats in wetland areas, and cultivated large tracts of land. It seems that virtually no part of this landscape was truly wild or pristine. Even some of the forested areas may have been more akin to a large park than to untouched forest. The archaeologist Dr. Heckelberger mentioned. And there's an interesting point with that last sentence. When we think about something like Savanac Forest, or we think about the New Forest, or we think about Sherwood Forest, or any of these great forests, we're always told that these are managed large parks or woodlands. So this is what they're saying with Amazon. And this is an interesting point, like all this is. Too hostile for habitation. Though multitudes of plants and animals thrive in the Amazon, the environment was long thought to be too hostile for large-scale human settlement. In particular, archaeologists believe that the soil quality was too poor to support the intense agriculture that would be necessary to support a population of significant size. The general impression of native Amazonians as Stone Age primitives, frozen at the time of a dawn of time, has changed little over the past few centuries, but now over the past 2 decades, it has. It has milked into the lines of complete change. There was this cherished image that the Amazon was of pure nature, a pure race. Get off that one. The problem is we have very few good empirical cases that tell us what Amazonia was like in 1492, one way or the other, but now we do. Those empirical cases are basically based on writing. So we're revising the view of the Amazon now, and it's provoking bitter debates, as we've got today. I'm sure that some of you would feel, I'm going to say it, maybe one or two of you are feeling a bit angry that I'm saying, advocating the pulling down of trees. I've not really said that, but I'm actually seeing it from the different angles. A key reason for the controversy has been the lack of good physical evidence, but now we've got it. We know what's going on. The first written record refers to the Kurukuru, a subgroup of the Zinguanos, with whom Dr. Heckelberger has worked for a decade. And the records go back to 1884. Now, the Kurukuru, and I do believe that's the right pronunciation because I've heard that before this lecture this week. Kurukuru's oral history, the first Europeans they encountered were slavers around 1750. But a Kurukuru, as part of the Zinguanos people, they would have been small in number, and then they were into their tens of thousands, and then into the 1950s, into the 500s. And I think the point that I'm trying to make there is, with the decimation of populations, the oral history is going to go queer, and you're going to misinterpret what the archaeologists are now seeing on the ground. With indigenous Amazonian numbers decimated and little concrete evidence of their earlier civilization, researchers visiting the Amazon generally concluded that its people had always been small primitive tribes who left little imprint on their environment. Keith and everybody else, that's exactly the point I was making at the beginning. That anecdotal story, that's everything about the anecdotal story. Even though the chieftains were saying that we've been here for thousands of years, they weren't defining what thousands of years meant, not in the sense of time, but what that occupation over the 1,000 years, what that actually entailed. So they're finding these settlements, plazas, roads, and the sense of the angle. So a year ago, Dr. Heckelberger, who collaborated with 2 Kurukuru chiefs on the scientific study, believes the engineered features of the landscape all involved elements of the Kurukuru's understanding of the entire cosmos. So here we go. I'm going to read this out. I'm not happy about it, but I will. Road directions and the orientations of other structures are keyed to the direction of the sun and stars, linking into whoever mentioned, I think it was Chris who mentioned about Machu Picchu and the sense of the cosmos. But I've got to say something there. With this obsession about the cosmos, there's got to be a lot more than just the stars. It has to be a lot more. It must be some linked to living rather than just looking up at the sky. And the point I'm trying to make is that we've got a different interpretation of the stars, and we put this onto past cultures. Their interpretation was very different than what we perceive. Roads 50 meters wide. Let's do it in feet, 165 feet wide. The width of a modern day 4-lane highway and flanked by large curbs. Now, however long these roads are, however long they are, that's millions of trees that need to be felled to create them. Okay, what anyone says, that's a lot of trees. The researchers report that the roads linked settlements every 2 to 3 miles. So in other words, you've got one there, 3 miles of road, one there, 3 miles of road, one there. It's nothing much different from today. This kind of planning would have required relatively sophisticated ability to reproduce angles over large distances. Line of sight. Where the villages converged on wetlands, the researchers found the remains of ancient bridges, moats, and canals. The Kuru still use many such structures today, but without the same interpretation that would be required to understand these great civilizations of the past. But these are, okay, Bedouin, Nabatean Bedouin, that's what we're talking about. They're using bits of their old technology, but they're not exactly completely into their old technology. I reckon the Kuru could just basically sit up and say, we're going to do what we did 1,000 years ago. I think that's possible because it's in them, except they can't articulate that. The entire area between settlements was carefully engineered and managed according to researchers. It was likely either cultivated or maintained as a sort of parkland, a managed area, rather than wild or pristine forest. Satellite images reveal that the vegetation now growing in these areas looks quite different from older forests. So in other words, what we think is old, we've been wrong. What might be older forest may have been utilized by human beings before. This continuous change, and trying to say to the Brazilian president, you've got to listen to the people of the Zinu. And this is where we are now. Conservation questions. The Upper Zinu is the largest continuous tract of Amazonian forest still under local management. Its history brings up the question of how to go about conserving the remaining Amazon. Should the goal be to preserve a pristine wilderness untouched by human activity, or a working landscape that supports indigenous people? So those two questions. Is the goal to what is the goal there? The management of the landscape by indigenous people is the way to look at things, I think. Perhaps both options need to be mutually exclusive. The landscape is not uniform. Because it's so poorly known and understood, Western knowledge has tended to treat the area as one homogeneous thing, homogeneous zone, one big jungle, one big rainforest, one natural lab for primitive people. We dig into the region, we realize that 500 years ago it was very different, and that even today there is a large amount of variation that we didn't appreciate before. Here we go, it's bloody trees, there's trees, it's always been like that, but it hasn't. We need to really look at this. These people were involved in the same kinds of cultural human innovation as elsewhere in the world. Now, I'm going to read this out in two ways, this next sentence. We're not talking about the Inca or Roman Empire here, but in terms of the rest of Europe, Asia, Africa, the Americans and elsewhere, Amazonians were no less capable of human culture and innovation than anywhere else. Why can't we see this as the Incan Empire? And why can't we see this as the Roman Empire? So what I'm going to do, we've got another little piece I want to touch upon. So what we're going to do, they're going to do this in two ways. We're going to go back to my images for a short while. Again, more of these earthworks in the Inca state of northern Brazil. And this is what I was talking about. What I was talking about was that the distribution, all those little black dots on the screen there. Oh, are we seeing a map?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Right. All the black dots on the screen there, they indicate domesticated Brazil nuts. Okay, distribution of Brazil nuts. Now, well, obviously, this is a sample. We've no idea what the true landscape is like, and what they're seeing with the distribution of Brazil nut and the domestication of it. We also see that that's where humans have been. The other thing to see is that you've got the word pineapples introduced into this area. They're growing in the middle of nowhere. They happen to be growing there, planted. Sweet potato growing in the middle of nowhere, planted. Cocoa, planted. We've got more cocoa, tobacco, beach palm, planted. Guarana, planted. And lots of the other ones, I've no idea what they are. The Iga or the Papati. You've got peppers, which have been planted. All of these areas have seen a direct impact of human agriculture at times in the not so distant past. So before we go on to this Hatara site, and as I just go back to this screen, let's look at this little article that I've got, which I'm also going to screen share. Just going to add Kathy into this. She said, I can't stand it when you do lectures where I'm just reading a load of blurb on the screen. Well, you're not supposed to be reading the blurb on the screen. I'm supposed to be reading it out. Ancient Amazon rainforest was once used for agriculture. Headline news, folks. This is in 2015. And strangely enough, most of this hasn't made it into the press cuttings since I've been teaching these classes. We very rarely, and I know one of you are going to say, oh, I cut out a press cutting last year. And I'm thinking, well, yeah, and these things are being found all the time. You could at least bring a bit more in. These are individual civilizations being discovered. The Amazon rainforest isn't that pristine wild landscape. The Amazon, the world's largest river basin, is home to the largest rainforest on Earth, 2.6 million square miles across 9 to 10 countries. This area known as Amazonia holds an extraordinary array of life, harboring 1 in 10 known species in the world and 1 in 5 of Earth's bird species, which is quite a thing. So to investigate what Amazonia was like before the European conquest, what we've got to do, we've got to go out there into the outback in a way, and we've got to really track down those species that have been planted. Now, I've not mentioned this, but we've been doing a little bit of research on Penrhys, and I actually have done a video recently with the GoPro equipment that we had funding to purchase. And when I went out onto Penrhys Hill, Michelle said, did you know there's a species of plant growing on Penrhys Hill that only grows in France and it doesn't grow anywhere else in Britain because it was introduced by a monastic order on the top of Penrhys Hill? That's the type of evidence that we're looking for across the Amazon basin. This little chart in front of you is not very clear, but you can see loads of little black dots. Those are all the archaeological sites that they so far found. They're all over the place, not just along the river basin and the river margins. They're all over the place. They're spread everywhere. That sense of the black earth. And smack bang in the middle there, you've got Manaus itself, that you've got is choked with settlements. And as Goff said, it's a truly wonderful landscape. It is a consensus that central and southern Amazonia were well populated with abundant domesticated plant, forests, landscapes, and soils. That's the consensus today. Listen to this as well, right? I've got to pick on Goff for this one. At least 83 native Amazonian species were domesticated to some degree by the time of contact with the Europeans. We know of about 83 vegetables and fruits. In 1980, how many different types of vegetables and fruits would you be able to acquire in your corner shop, Goff?
Well, probably only local produce, potatoes, I don't know,
carrots?
maybe 10 different types of vegetable.
These people had access to 83. So that shows you the diversity, much more diverse than we were in the 1980s. And I got to be honest with you, it'd be really difficult to find even 30 in a modern day supermarket. So we're looking at, within those native species, sweet potato, cocoa, tobacco, pineapple, cassava, like that one, hot peppers, and numerous fruit trees and palms, which I've not even heard of. And this other point here, let's go for the upper figure, 5,000 plant species that were not domesticated, but we know from various ethnographical research and other archaeological evidence on the ground, up to 5,000 plant species were used for other purposes. 5,000. So that makes a little witch like my Michelle going into the woods, picking a few herbs to cast a love spell on me, but pale into insignificance. These people knew what they were doing. Although many present-day Amazonian forests may seem natural, research suggests they were domesticated to varying degrees, possessing different populations of plants than one would expect in a naturally biologically diverse forest. In other words, there's very little primeval tropical rainforest in existence in the Amazon basin. And in Britain, we've got basically 0.01% of our entire landmass that still contains a primeval forest or woodland. Most of our primeval forest or woodlands on the planet don't exist. So these dark earths, it's saying that even if they think of 0.1% of the Amazon landscape was occupied in the past, that's still a considerable landscape over the past 6,000 years, with numbers and places of occupation expanding rapidly. I'll go away from the 80s, likely that South America had a population of about 10 million people. When most people think about the grandeur of past Native American societies, they think about the Inca and the Aztec. But when we look at this landscape, it's a lot more diverse. Look at this as well. Change the word Spanish to Portuguese. Portuguese adventurers, when they come to Brazil, saw that there was a large number of healthy, well-fed people and believing an abundance of food in every community in the Amazonia. Because they went to the wrong place and started cutting down the trees, they found that the soil's not to be as rich as those people that were planting the food in regards to the native population. And obviously coming across disease and so on. But I feel that examining these people being wiped out by disease with the Amazon, that's not really the case. The Inca were wiped out by diseases. We've almost proven that in the other lecture. But these people died out or moved well before those invaders got there. Although the Amazonia reverted to wilderness after the decimation of native populations, the writer Clement stressed that it doesn't mean the Amazon rainforest will return wherever modern society allows it to. This is a fallacy because native Amazonians did not clear-cut the forest, nor plant pastures and soy. We are not saying that modern societies can clear-cut the forest for food production and replant. That's a good point. That's what we said throughout this lecture, that we can't cut down all the trees and expect it to come back as it did in the past. It came back in the past because they manage it differently than we're managing it today. How the native Amazonians could support complex societies without destroying the environment, we might learn something from the native Amazonians before it's too late, folks. And before we finish today, let's look at one final issue. It's the site known as Hatara. This is a short bit. We've got a little bit of text. Hatara, and it's alongside the Amazon River. And we get raised areas alongside the riverbanks. Manaus itself, and there's Hatara. It's just slipped in there, a little bit south of Manaus, and it's like lots of sites within the landscape. It's either near a modern city or nowhere near it. This one is near a modern city, and what we do find is a great plethora of archaeology. And I'll just read this one out. And sensibly enough, this is going to end quite sensibly tonight, time-wise. So Hugo, aquatic resources play a major role in modern Amazonian societies. However, little is known about their importance in pre-Columbian economies. What we do see about the Hatara site is a site that was very well developed and very much reliant upon the rich ecosystem associated with the water. Within the diet of the archaeology that we can see in the layers and some of the bones of people that have been excavated, not necessarily large burial sites that we were discussing earlier on. We see that this population at Hatara was very much based on trade, and they were very much based on the aquatic diet rather than a land-based diet. And that is rather interesting, because if you're based on an aquatic diet, you're not going to exhaust the landscape around you. You can just keep adding dead, rotting materials to the landscape, enriching it. Bring it into agriculture, light agriculture, bring it into tree growth, cutting down the trees, a wonderful sense of difference and variety. This is what I've tried to do today, give you a lot of variety, a lot of information. But it's a ceramic culture, they're trading pottery. And if anyone, do you know, a few months ago, I had, nobody take this the wrong way, I had an absolute orgasm a few months ago in one of the classes when one of you brought an article in saying that we've got ape remains from Northern Europe. And obviously they may have, those ape remains may be the ancestors to Neanderthals. So he got really excited with that. If anyone ever comes across an article that portrays this trade between America and Europe well before the Spanish, make sure you send it to me and get it out there. And don't hesitate to send that to me. I would want to see it. And again, lots of the evidence that we've get from this site at Hatara are these terra preta levels, the black earth levels. And there is the site, the Hatara site, Manaus, and then finally a harpoon. Not only do we see a fish harpoon, and we've got the evidence. So obviously this is a different society based on fishing rather than land-based, and the other peoples in the south known as the Zini people. So, and the Inca people. So we've got so many civilizations in. I don't know if anyone's ever going to sit down and say, right, we've got the Zini Empire, and we've got the Hatara Empire, and we've got the Inca Empire. I don't know if anyone's going to ever sit down and do that. But if we do, I wouldn't be surprised. And as that sort of rips into a fish, and then you're going to pluck the fish out of the water with your harpoon with that serrated edge, teeth mounted into that sort of harpoon there. Wonderful tool, the archaeological evidence, and that's where the archaeological evidence is going to end today. Are there any questions? Chrissy Babes?
No, thanks, Carl. That was very interesting.
I'm glad. Keith, anything else?
No, I can't really think of it. There was lots of things to consider there, but no, I can't think of any questions at the moment.
Before I ask Goff, next week we will be looking at a site in Africa for once, a civilization that was once great, but was believed to have been built by Europeans. The site known as Mapu Picchu and Great Zimbabwe, and that's what we're looking at next week. So, anything else you would like to say, Goff?
No, it's fascinating. Very good. Thank you.
Thank you, Goff. And what I'm going to say is, don't forget, we're on the new course of evening lectures on the Wednesday, and you'll be very, very welcome to join us on Saturday as well. Obviously, the forum next week and everything else going on. Ellen said to send it in an email, and that's what I intend to do after this today. So I will do that. Ellen, anything you would like to say? Mic off.
Thank you. No time.
Okay. We'll do Jim and Chris. Anything from Jim and Chris?
Yes.
Jim, did you get your book?
Oh, yes, thank you very much. Yeah, very interesting.
Right, okay.
Anyway, the point is, if the Romans were trading with South America, is there any Roman writings of the period that refers to South America at all?
The answer is no, but then if you want to look at interpretation, some of these writings could be interpreted to say that. Obviously, we know that Roman traders are going out of the mouth of Hercules into the Atlantic Ocean. So we know that they're heading. Obviously, they're going from the Mediterranean to get to Britain for a start. So it's a matter of just heading in a direction, and you're going to be in South America. So that's the answer. What about you, Jim?
Never made it
Oh,
back,
not Jim,
really.
Chris.
I mean, it's a long way to go on a Roman ship across the Atlantic.
Oh, God. Right, okay, here we go. What about Karen and Kathy? Why don't you all use one computer screen? We'd be able to hear you properly then.
Because it's social distancing.
Why? Okay. Why don't you do what Anne
it.
did in Bridgen? Cut up her bra and use them as face masks. Oh, I've seen the images. They're really bad. She had one with the name Playtex on it.
Ah.
Can you imagine going around with a breast on? Yeah. Anyway, Karen and Kathy, anything you'd like to say before we go? Oh God, they've gone quiet. It's amazing. Yeah. All right, then. I'm going to tell Rosamond that you'll be seeing it on Sunday, Kathy. If there's no other questions, that's been a delight today. We've got so much across. That hasn't been exhausting as it sometimes is, but that's been really good today. I've enjoyed that. So I'm going to go now. I'll see you all soon. I'll send you an email, so look at your email straight after this. So Karen, Ellen, Jim, Chris, Keith, Goff, and I will see you all soon. Thank you for your support today, and I'll see you soon. Bye-bye, babe. Bye. If you leave me now, you take away the greatest part of me.
Have a good week, everybody.
La 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 la. It's just you and me, Chris. She's gone.